Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you are someone who is looking for the most laser beam like rifles, this is the content for you. Obviously, there's a lot of pretty easy to use weapons in the game, but there are a few select standout guns right now that are just incredibly straightforward. You pick them up, you're gonna fry with them, point and shoot, you're gonna be super accurate, and that in turn is going to affect your realistic TTK a ton. We obviously break down TTK graphs a lot, and those reflect 100% accuracy, which no one's ever gonna actually hit in games. So even though some weapons today might not be the most powerful, they're so easy to use that when you actually factor in accuracy with maybe where the strongest gun you only hit 45% of your shots, and then on the most accurate setup for some of these guns you hit 60-70% of your shots, the TTKs are going to be a lot more aligned there, in actual gameplay. And first up, we're going to talk about one of the most low recoil, really no recoil weapons in the game, in the Kastov 545, featuring the conversion kit, the Jack Requiem kit. So when I go through and I do some recoil pattern here, I'm not going to control the recoil whatsoever. This is the raw recoil pattern when you shoot. No control whatsoever applied. And yeah, you get the point. This thing literally has no recoil whatsoever because of this conversion kit. When you go through and you actually build it out with this Jack Requiem kit, it is the most laser beam like weapon, and it's actually pretty solid as well for like some mid-range fights, so it's a bit more aggressive. We've talked about this setup a bit recently. It's actually really competitive, all things considered. You can see the recoil reduction of Jack Requiem is just absolutely nuts. Now, Requiem does hurt the velocity quite a bit, and that's why I go for Sonic Suppressor. This ups the velocity, and obviously those recoil cons don't really matter there. And then High Grain, same deal. Irrelevant recoil cons, but it helps out the velo and gets us up to 750, which is okay. It's definitely not great, but it's something you have to live with if you want this no recoil like setup. Obviously, we got an extended mag on there. 60 is going to be the max in this case, and that works just fine. And then use whatever optic you're comfortable with. If you're fighting for close to mid-range, maybe something like a Slate, a Glassless, a Nidar. If you're more mid to long range, and the Eagle Eye would be great there too. But whatever optic you are comfortable with, always go ahead, run that, and you'll be set. The Kastov 545 is actually so easy to use. Then right alongside that, we have our other Kastov, the Kastov 762, which also features the Jack Requiem kit. Now the 762 is a little bit weaker than the 545 in terms of pure TTK, but it is every bit as easy to use. Again, no recoil control here whatsoever, and you can see there's maybe a little bit more bounce like an MW2 gun would usually have, but its recoil pattern maybe even more centered than the Kastov 545, right? This thing is an absolute laser beam as well. And curiously enough, you're going to set it up in basically the same exact way. Requiem kit on here too does absolutely ridiculous stuff to your recoil control. Hurts the velocity. We are a little bit better here though. We're at a 794. And once again, we are stacking Sonic Suppressor on there, which gives us 13%. And then also High Grain, which does 15%. Plus you get some better range on there too. This thing, like I said, does fall off a little bit over the long range, but as I alluded to earlier, accuracy factored in, it's not nearly as large of a gap as you might see on a TTK graph when looking at like the Kastov 762 versus an MCW or an STG or an SVA, something like that. It's actually probably a lot more competitive than it might seem. Here in this case, the max extended mag is 40. This fire rate's not as crazy as the 545, so that's okay. It's not great. 50 or 60 is always ideal, but 40 will get the job done. And then 2.5 times Eagle Eye, a Nidar, a Glassless, whatever optic you want to run here as well. Run that, you're good to go. Comfortability is really all that matters here. But this thing, much like the 545, is quite literally zero recoil, easiest gun to use in the game. And by the way, as we are breaking down all the weapons, all the setups here today, if you enjoy the video, if you find it helpful, like rating is always seriously appreciated. And if you are new to the channel, every single day I got you covered with all things you need to know about COD, whether it's Warzone, Black Ops 6 coming up, it's all here. So feel free to hit that subscribe button. Join us on the road to 1 million subscribers. We'd love to see how close to that we can get prior to BO6 launching. Next up here, we have another fantastic rifle in the SVA 545. With this one though, it's a little bit different. As you can see, we are in full auto right now, and if I were to go through with the recoil and just spray this thing, you'll see it's got a standard recoil pattern, right? It's going up and to the left basically, and that's a decent bit of recoil. But the trick with the SVA is you go through, you flip it into semi-auto mode, which is actually hyper burst, and suddenly this is how the weapon behaves when you are just straight up spamming it. It also is quite literally zero recoil. Hyper burst for whatever, when you flip it into semi-auto, is just an absolute laser beam straight up, which is super fun. fun. So you can actually sort of kit this around that and optimize it more for mid to long range with zero recoil whatsoever. You just have to be good at spamming your triggers. So again, use whatever optic you want to use here. Eagle Eye I think works really well for this particular setup. 60 round extended mag works just fine there. We've got high grain on this. In this case, we're up over an 1100 velo, which is fantastic for a hit scan range. This means when you're fighting 40, 50, 60, 70 meters, it's going to be super easy to stay on target. You're not going to have to worry about bullet drop or bullet lead. You aim for the chest, you're going to hit the chest. You aim for the head, you're going to hit the head. Means your TTK is going to be even more competitive there. Sonic suppressor here as well for the better velocity increases. Again, the control cons here do not matter. And then lastly, just because this isn't a conversion kit you can mess around, I like having the precision barrel on here just because it's going to extend the range and the velocity even more. That said, if you wanted to make this more aggressive and you didn't care as much about that range and velo, you could try out an aggressive underbarrel, an aggressive stock, and sort of see how that would work. But I think this optimizes it the most for the mid to long range, where you're probably going to be using the SVA in the majority of your gunfights. And this setup is just so reliable, and it's honestly been like this for some time. I'm kind of surprised they never adjusted the way that hyperburst works, but because they haven't, yes, it is one of the easiest guns in the game still. Hey everyone, real quick, wanted to give a shout out to my friends over at Control Freak. I've been using Control Freak thumbsticks on my controllers for years now. Like honestly, I feel like I can't play without them at this point. Getting that better grip on your thumbsticks, extending your range of motion, making it easier to be accurate and to stay accurate, truly, it is a game changer. So if you ever want to pick up a pair for yourself, toss in code IMMORTAL at checkout and you'll get a nice little discount. The link for that will be down in the description below if you're interested. Now, one you might not have seen coming, the Sakin MG38 from MW2. This is a weapon that's basically got no attention this entire year, which is interesting because last year during Warzone 2, it was actually one of the better LMGs in the game. This year though, it just hasn't been super competitive, but it is super low recoil. And again, despite not having the best TTK, accuracy factored in, it's actually closer to some other like solid good mid to long range options than you might think. As far as the recoil here goes, again, not controlling anything, but it is a very straightforward pattern. And for an MW2 gun, it's actually relatively low visual recoil. We're just basically going up and to the left, but there's not that much vertical movement there as opposed to, something like the SVA, which obviously moved a lot more in its default nature. So this thing is actually really easy to use. And of course, when you have 100 rounds to spray and pray, it's a little bit more forgiving as well, which is pretty nice. Once more, for the optic, use whatever you want here. The choice is yours. 100 round mag, so we're already fine with that. We don't need an extended mag or anything. High grain on here, obviously helping out with that range and that velocity some. A 1200 velo is crazy. I actually didn't realize this was this good until I started testing it out and looking at different setups for it and figuring out what was best. But 1200 velo is so good for mid to long range where you're going to be using this the most. Paracord underbarrel works really well here for the horizontal control. Plus, it gives you some mobility on a weapon that is just, so slow. That said, Bruin Heavy would also be a really good option here too. And I think Jack Slash even has a place as well. You can sort of test around between those three and see, how you like those and how you like the feel of those in specific there. With the muzzles, things are a little bit weird though, because in most cases, we'd have quartermaster suppressor, but as you can see here, we don't have the quartermaster suppressor. So Spirit Fire is going to be one that is solid for sure. Like it's always a solid choice, better range, better velo, and a little bit of better control too. Like can't go wrong with that. That said, if you're okay with showing on the map, the Sakin does have access to the new Caster X1 compensator, and this thing does actually hurt your velocity a little bit, but you're still up over 1,000, and it gives you really good control properties. So that might be something worth looking into as well. And then lastly here, I just had the Silver Series barrel, better range, velocity, and control on there once more. But yeah, there's a couple of ways to build this out, at least in terms of muzzles and whatnot, and depending on how you like the feel of it, it's actually a decently good sleeper weapon. Then lastly here, we got another LMG in the Pulemyot 762. This time we are using the conversion kit for this, which is a little bit more aggressive and absolutely super low recoil. When we go through, we spray this thing without controlling. Obviously it's an MW3 gun, so low visual recoil, not a bunch of noise going on there. And this is quite literally a straight vertical pattern. So yes, it's got a lot of vertical movement, but since it's just straight vertical, you can just pull straight down and it's essentially going to look like some of those other no recoil patterns that we had over there, right? Like this is such a straightforward one to learn that you only got to spend a couple of seconds seconds figuring out just how drastic the bounce up is, and you'll be good to go. No shenanigans going on with deviance to the left and to the right. It's no S-curve or anything like that, so it ends up being super, super easy. Bullpup kit on here does help out a ton with that recoil. Also gives you way better movement, which is pretty solid for a heavier LMG. This is actually decently aggressive, especially considering you have a 100 round mag on this. Like, most guns are not going to be this agile for an LMG with a 100 round mag. Because we're using the conversion kit, we get the recoil reduction pad stock, obviously clutch for a setup like this that we're focused on low recoil. Again, use whatever optic you want to here. The long barrel just helps out with range and velocity, but this thing is so easy to use that that's just, honestly, in my opinion, perfectly okay. And then we also go for the quartermaster suppressor. That said, you probably saw that velo stat of 777. That's not great if you wanted to use spirit fire, because this is already decently easy to use. You could at least get up to 836 with that, and you'd be pretty solid, and that could be a pretty good alternative as well if you really care about upping that velocity in particular here. But that said, between these 5 weapons, point and shoot, you could pick these up, and honestly, with a lot of builds, they're going to be incredibly easy. These, of course, are just optimized to you know, have the best effects in game. But you're looking for something straightforward, you don't want to have to work, you just want to point, shoot, and fry, these are the weapons to look out for. That said, that's going to wrap things up. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating would be really appreciated, and on your way out, hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications to guarantee you're up to date with news, updates, patch notes, meta breakdowns, everything going on in COD right here on a daily basis. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.